r/AskReddit by Redmond ETS. What are the craziest declassified CIA documents? The plan after 9/11 to make figurines that look like Osama bin Laden and give them to kids in South Asia. After it's left in the sun for a certain amount of time, its face would peel off to reveal a demon-like visage with red skin, green eyes, and black markings. Basically a demon. The objective was to scare kids and their parents so bin Laden and Al-Qaeda would lose support. Here's a picture of the demonic bin Laden. The Pentagon Papers, which were leaked, not outright declassified, and the resultant Church Committee report. These are what made public the CIA's actions in overthrowing governments and instigating or assisting coups all over the world for decades leading up to the 70s. Pretty much every negative stereotype of the CIA we have today was created or informed by the Pentagon Papers and Church Committee report. Operation Northwoods is pretty fucked up. Same with MKUltra. One CIA operative, who drew up a plan to have packets of extra large condoms, labeled small, dropped on USSR. The idea was to lower their morale. The acoustic kitty is pretty crazy. They basically put a microphones and radio in a cat and tried to release into the Soviet embassy to wander around eavesdropping since nobody suspects a wandering cat. Didn't it immediately get hit by a car? That's what I was thinking. Edit. I checked. The cat was released nearby, but was hit and allegedly killed by a taxi almost immediately. Psychological warfare in the Philippines in the 1950s comes to mind. The CIA conducted research to figure out which sort of myths and superstitions the Philippine people had. They discovered that they were afraid of vampires. At one point they disrupted a group by snatching a local man, murdering him, and putting teeth marks on his neck. They then hung him upside down for his friends to find, which terrified the village. This was all part of an effort to elect Ramon Magsaysay as president, who basically acted as a puppet for the United States. The CIA wrote his speeches and directed his policy. All the failed assassination attempts against Fidel Castro. According to Fabian Escalante, who worked for the Cuban counterintelligence, there were 638 of them. Here are some highlights. In 1960 they tried to poison his cigars. They asked the Chicago mob for help and they said poison pills are the best. The mobsters hired a local assassin, who gave them to an ice cream milkshake parlor employee who was supposed to slip them into Castro's ice cream. When he tried to get the poison pills from the freezer, they were frozen solid on the coils of the freezer. They planned to put explosives under a painted seashell, as Castro loved to go scuba diving and collect seashells. The plan was discarded as impractical. In the same year they contaminated a scuba diving suit for Castro with a fungus that should give Castro a deadly disease. The person tasked with this, American lawyer James Donovan, who was negotiating the release of hostages after the Bay of Pigs invasion, couldn't do it in the end. They trained his lover to poison him, but she got cold feet. They had a James Bond-like idea of poisoning him with a tiny needle attached to a ballpoint pen. The government official who was supposed to stab him with that needle threw the pen away, as he was too afraid that the needle might accidentally poison him instead. Last but not least, they had the idea to assassinate his character by spraying a LSD-like chemical into the broadcasting studio where he held his speeches. The idea was to make him look confused and unfit to rule. The plan was abandoned as the chemical was unreliable. You can download most of Osama bin Laden's hard drive off the CIA's website. It's got a fair few licensed movies, anime, games, that sort of thing. All free for anyone who wants to get it. Operation Sea Spray, a 1950 United States Navy secret biological warfare experiment in which Serratia marcescens and Bacillus globigii bacteria were sprayed over the San Francisco Bay Area in California, in order to determine how vulnerable a city like San Francisco may be to a bioweapon attack. Between 1949 and 1969, open-air tests of biological agents were conducted 239 times. In 80 of those experiments, the Army said it used live bacteria that its researchers at the time thought were harmless. The pardon of the Japanese who ran Unit 731 in exchange for their findings. They performed countless experiments on live human prisoners of war, cutting off limbs to test blood loss, injecting them with diseases and seeing how they progressed when left untreated, vivisection of these same individuals, and other really fucking disgusting stuff that I don't have the stomach to type out. You can Google the rest. The US government felt it was more important to have that information in American hands than to let it go to the Russians, or be lost. You'd never be able to conduct those kind of experiments again, and for good reason, so they considered it the lesser of two evils. Project Paperclip, taking former Nazi scientists from Germany to America, to hopefully beat the Soviets in the space race. During the 60s, the CIA noticed that artists tend to lean towards socialism and communism. They realized the best way to prevent this or discredit these political positions was to make them wealthy so they would be more invested in capitalism. To do this, the CIA would anonymously buy modern art pieces no matter how nonsensical for very high prices. This made the otherwise highly niche and difficult to access modern art genre a chic, fashionable and highly profitable genre, and basically prevented prominent members of the art community from turning to socialism or communism by converting them to wealthy members of the upper class. I think someone mentioned Jackson Pollock was one of those artists. When the Space Shuttle Challenger was destroyed, it was reported that all 7 astronauts were killed instantly. It was revealed decades later that some, if not all of the astronauts survived the initial explosion, as the cockpit cabin had enough protection to not be breached. For 2 minutes and 45 seconds, they were awake and aware, as they plummeted toward the Atlantic Ocean. Understandably, NASA knew that the news of their terrifying death would have crippled the space program even more than it already was. That's all, folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening.